The dining hall was silent except for the soft clink of silver against porcelain. Princess Kate sat perfectly still, her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. Across the long mahogany table, Queen Camilla watched her with a small, tight smile. The kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. Kate felt the weight of that stare. She'd felt it before, in countless rooms, at countless gatherings. But tonight was different. Tonight something felt deliberate. The servers moved like shadows along the walls, carrying covered dishes toward the table. The scent of roasted meat and herbs filled the air. Kate's stomach tightened. Not from hunger. From instinct, this was a private dinner. Just family, Camilla had said. But the room felt anything but intimate. The chandeliers blazed overhead, casting sharp shadows across the faces of the few guests present. Prince William sat beside Kate, his jaw set, his hand resting protectively near hers on the table. Camilla leaned back in her chair, fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. She glanced at the head server and gave a slight nod. The man stepped forward, his face unreadable, and placed a silver-domed plate directly in front of Kate. "Tonight's main course," Camilla announced. Her voice smooth as silk, is something quite special. A delicacy. I thought Princess Catherine might enjoy something traditional. Kate's pulse quickened. She looked down at the dome, then back at Camilla. The older woman's smile widened just a fraction. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another incredible true tale like this one. William shifted beside her. He'd noticed it too. The tone, the timing, the way Camilla's eyes glinted under the light. The server lifted the dome. Shellfish. A beautifully arranged plate of prawns. Scallops and lobster, glistening in butter and garnished with lemon and parsley. It looked exquisite. It looked expensive. It looked like a trap. Kate's breath caught in her throat. She was deathly allergic to shellfish. The kind of allergy that meant hospitals, emergency rooms, EpiPens. The kind that everyone in the royal family knew about because it had been documented, discussed, and noted in every official record since the day she'd joined the family. Camilla knew. Kate's eyes lifted slowly to meet Camilla's gaze across the table. The queen consort's expression was calm. To calm, almost amused. "Is there a problem, Catherine?" Camilla asked softly. Kate opened her mouth to speak, but the words stuck. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. She glanced at William, whose face had gone pale. His hand moved to hers beneath the table, squeezing tight before Kate could respond. A figure stepped forward from the shadows near the wall. A royal guard. Tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform pristine. He moved with quiet authority, his boots barely making a sound against the marble floor. His name was Thomas. Kate had seen him before. Always stationed nearby during palace events, always watching, always alert. He stopped beside Kate's chair and cleared his throat.
"Your Majesty," he said.
His voice steady and respectful, addressing Camilla. "There's been an error in the kitchen." Camilla's smile faltered. Just slightly. Thomas didn't wait for permission. He reached forward and lifted Kate's plate with both hands, his movements smooth and deliberate. Princess Catherine's dietary restrictions were not followed, he continued, his tone firm but polite. "This dish contains allergens that could cause serious harm. It should not have been served." The room went completely still. Camilla's eyes narrowed. Her fingers stopped drumming. For a long moment, no one spoke. No one moved. Thomas stood his ground, holding the plate, his gaze fixed somewhere just above Camilla's head. Professional, unyielding. Kate's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know if she should thank him or stay silent. William's hand tightened around hers. Finally, Camilla leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. Her voice dropped, cold and sharp. "Is that so?" Thomas nodded once, his expression unchanging. "Yes, Your Majesty." The kitchen staff were given explicit instructions regarding Princess Catherine's allergies. This plate should never have left the kitchen. Camilla's lips pressed into a thin line. She tilted her head, her eyes scanning Thomas from head to toe, as if sizing him up. As if deciding whether to challenge him further, Kate could feel the tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. Her throat was dry. She wanted to speak, to diffuse the situation, but she couldn't find the words. Not without making things worse, William finally broke the silence. His voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Thank you, Thomas," he said quietly. "Please ensure the kitchen is reminded of the protocols." Thomas bowed his head slightly. "Of course, Your Highness." He turned and walked toward the kitchen doors, still carrying the plate. The moment he disappeared, the room seemed to exhale, but the relief was short-lived. Camilla leaned back in her chair again, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the armrest. She looked at Kate with an expression that was hard to read. Not quite anger, not quite amusement, something in between. "How unfortunate," Camilla said softly. "I had no idea the kitchen would make such a careless mistake." Kate felt the lie hang in the air between them. She knew, William knew. Even the other guests at the table who had remained silent throughout the exchange knew, but no one said it out loud. "It's fine," Kate replied, her voice steady, despite the tremor she felt inside. "These things happen." Camilla's eyes flickered with something unreadable. She raised her glass of wine and took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact with Kate. "Indeed they do," she murmured. The rest of the dinner was served without incident. A simple roasted chicken was brought out for Kate, plain and safe. She ate in silence, every bite feeling heavier than the last. The conversation around the table resumed, but it was strained, polite. Forced. Kate could feel Camilla's gaze on her throughout the meal. Not constant, but frequent. Like a predator watching prey from across a clearing. When dessert was finally served, Kate excused herself as soon as she could. William followed her out into the corridor, his hand immediately finding hers. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. Kate nodded, though her hands were still shaking. "Yes, I'm fine. Thanks to Thomas." William exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "That was deliberate, Kate. You know it was." "I know," she whispered. They stood in the hallway for a long moment, the sound of laughter drifting faintly from the dining room behind them. It felt distant, hollow. "We need to be careful," William said finally. "She's testing you, seeing how far she can push." Kate nodded again. She'd known this wouldn't be easy. Joining the royal family never was. But she hadn't expected this. Not this kind of cruelty disguised as hospitality. "I'll speak to Thomas," William continued. "Make sure he's protected." "If Camilla finds out he intervened, she already knows," Kate interrupted softly. She was sitting right there. She saw everything. William's jaw tightened. "Then we need to make sure he doesn't face consequences for doing the right thing." Kate squeezed his hand. "Agreed." They walked back toward their private quarters in silence, the long corridors of the palace stretching out before them like a maze. Kate couldn't shake the image of Camilla's smile. That cold, calculated smile. She wondered how many others had faced it before her. How many had survived it? Later that night, Kate lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. William was asleep beside her, his breathing slow and steady. But Kate couldn't quiet her mind. She kept replaying the moment. The dome lifting. The shellfish glistening on the plate. The look in Camilla's eyes. And then Thomas. Stepping forward without hesitation, risking his position, maybe even his career, to protect her. She barely knew him. He was just one of many guards who rotated through palace duties. But tonight, he'd been more than that. He'd been a shield. Kate made a mental note to find him tomorrow, to thank him properly, to make sure he knew his actions hadn't gone unnoticed, because in a place like this, where power played out in whispers and glances, small acts of courage mattered more than anything. The next morning, Kate woke early. The palace was quiet, the hall still dim in the pre-dawn light. She dressed simply and slipped out of her quarters. Moving quietly through the corridors, she found Thomas stationed near the east wing. Standing at attention, his hands clasped behind his back. When he saw her approaching, he straightened even further. Though his expression remained neutral, "Your Highness," he said with a respectful nod. Kate stopped a few feet away, her hands folded in front of her. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "For last night, Toma's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe relief. "I was simply doing my duty, ma'am," he replied. Kate shook her head gently. "It was more than that. You stepped in when no one else would. You protected me, and I won't forget it." For the first time, Thomas's stoic mask cracked just slightly. A hint of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "It was the right thing to do," he said quietly. Kate nodded. "Still, thank you." She turned to leave, but Thomas spoke again, his voice lower now. "Ma'am, if I may?" ... Kate paused and looked back at him. "Be careful," he said simply. "Not everyone in this palace wishes you well." Kate held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "I know," she whispered. "Believe me, I know." Over the following days, Kate noticed subtle changes in the palace. Small things. Glances that lingered too long. Conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Doors that closed just a little too quickly. Camilla was everywhere, and nowhere at once. She attended the same events, walked the same halls, but there was a distance now. A coldness that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, and Kate was only now seeing it clearly. William tried to shield her from it. He rearranged schedules, declined certain invitations, stayed close whenever possible. But he couldn't be there all the time. And Kate refused to hide. She had work to do. Charities to support. Appearances to make. She wouldn't let fear control her. But the incident at dinner had changed something. It had drawn a line. And everyone in the palace knew which side they were on. One afternoon, Kate was reviewing documents in her private sitting room when there was a soft knock at the door. She looked up, expecting one of her assistants. Instead, it was Margaret, one of the senior housekeepers. An older woman with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in a neat bun.
"Eh?"
"Your Highness," Margaret said, stepping inside and closing the door quietly behind her. "Do you have a moment?" Kate set down her pen. "Of course. Please, sit." Margaret hesitated, then perched on the edge of a chair across from Kate. She looked nervous, her hands twisted together in her lap. "I don't want to overstep," Margaret began carefully. "But I felt you should know something." Kate's pulse quickened. "What is it?" Margaret glanced toward the door, as if checking that no one was listening. Then she leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The shellfish at dinner," she said. "It wasn't a kitchen error." Kate's breath caught. She'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed out loud felt like a punch to the chest. "How do you know?" Kate asked quietly. Margaret's expression was pained. "I've worked in this palace for 30 years, ma'am. I know how the kitchen operates. Every meal is checked and double-checked, especially for the family. Dietary restrictions are marked in red on every order sheet. There's no way that plate would have been prepared unless someone specifically requested it." Kate felt her hands go cold. "Someone requested it," she repeated slowly. "You mean it was deliberate?" Margaret interrupted gently. "And I think you know who gave the order." Kate sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She'd known. Deep down, she'd known from the moment the dome was lifted. But having it confirmed was different. It made it real, undeniable. "Why are you telling me this?" Kate asked. Margaret's eyes softened. "Because you're kind. And because you deserve to know what you're up against. I've seen a lot of things in this palace, Your Highness. A lot of cruelty disguised as tradition. And I've watched good people get crushed by it." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't want that to happen to you." Kate felt a lump rise in her throat. She reached across and placed her hand over Margaret's. "Thank you," she whispered, "for telling me, for caring." Margaret nodded, blinking back tears. "Just be careful, ma'am, and watch who you trust." After Margaret left, Kate sat alone in the quiet room, staring at the documents in front of her without really seeing them. Her mind was elsewhere. In the dining hall, in the cold stare across the table, in the smile that had promised danger. She thought about Thomas, about Margaret, about the small acts of bravery that kept her grounded in a world that often felt like quicksand. That evening, William found her standing by the window, looking out over the palace gardens. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. "You're quiet tonight," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I spoke with Margaret today," Kate said without turning. She confirmed it. The shellfish. It was deliberate. William's jaw clenched. "I knew it," Camilla ordered it. Kate continued softly. "She wanted to see what would happen. Whether I'd eat it, whether I'd speak up, whether I'd survive the humiliation, or something worse." William turned to face her, his eyes filled with anger and something deeper. Pain. "This has to stop," he said firmly. "I won't let her do this to you." Kate finally looked at him, her expression calm but resolute. "She's testing me, William. Seeing if I'll break. If I'll run, if I'll give her a reason to say I don't belong here." "You do belong here," William said fiercely. "More than she does." Kate smiled sadly. "That's not how she sees it. And that's not how a lot of people see it." William reached for her hands, holding them tightly. "Then we prove them wrong. Together." Kate nodded, drawing strength from his presence. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Camilla had made her move, the first of what would likely be many, and Kate had to decide how she was going to respond the next day. Kate attended a charity event at a children's hospital. It was one of her favorite types of appearances. No cameras inside, no press. Just her, the kids, and the families. Real moments. Real smiles. She spent hours there, reading stories, playing games, listening to the children talk about their dreams and their fears. It reminded her why she'd chosen this life. Not for the titles, or the palaces, or the protocol, but for the chance to make a difference. To use her position for something good. As she was leaving, one of the mothers approached her. A woman with tired eyes and a grateful smile. "Thank you," the woman said, her voice thick with emotion. "My daughter hasn't smiled like that in months. You gave her hope today." Kate felt tears prick her eyes. She hugged the woman tightly. "She gave me hope too," Kate whispered back. On the drive back to the palace, Kate stared out the window, watching the city pass by. The streets were crowded with people going about their lives. Working, shopping, living, free from the weight of scrutiny and expectation. She envied them sometimes, but she also knew she had a purpose here, a role to play. And she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. When she arrived back at the palace, she walked through the halls with her head high. She passed servants and staff, nodding politely. She passed other members of the family, offering cordial greetings. And when she passed Camilla in the corridor, she stopped. The two women faced each other in the dim light of the hallway. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kate smiled, a real smile, confident, unafraid. "Good evening, Your Majesty," she said warmly. Camilla's eyes narrowed slightly. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected fear, submission, retreat. Instead, she got strength. "Good evening." Catherine Camilla replied coolly. Kate held her gaze for one more second, then continued walking, her footsteps echoing softly against the marble floor. Behind her, Camilla stood frozen, watching her go. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed the queen consort's face. Word traveled fast inside the palace walls. Faster than Kate had anticipated. Within days, whispers began to spread about the dinner incident. Not the official version, sanitized and polite, but the truth. Staff members talked. Guards exchanged knowing looks. Even some of the junior royals began to pay closer attention. Kate became aware of the shift. People watched her differently now. Not with pity, but with curiosity. Maybe even respect. She'd stood her ground. She'd survived the test. But she also knew Camilla wouldn't let it end there. The queen. Consort was clever, calculated. She wouldn't strike again immediately. That would be too obvious. Instead, she would wait. Watch. Find another opportunity. Another way to apply pressure? Kate prepared herself. She spent more time with her team, reviewing schedules, discussing security protocols, ensuring every detail of her public life was airtight. She couldn't control what happened behind closed doors, but she could control how she responded. William noticed the change in her. The way she carried herself now? More guarded. More aware. It broke his heart to see her lose some of that lightness she'd once had. But he was also proud. She wasn't running. She was adapting. One evening, as they sat together in their private quarters, William brought up something that had been weighing on him. "Spoke with Thomas," he said quietly. Kate looked up from the book she'd been reading. "And he's been reassigned," William said, his voice tight with frustration. "Effective immediately. They're moving him to a different post, away from family duties." Kate's chest tightened. "Camilla did this." "I can't prove it," William admitted. "But the timing is too convenient. He intervenes at dinner, and suddenly he's transferred." Kate set her book aside, anger flaring inside her. "This is punishment for helping me." "I tried to fight it," William said. "But the decision came from higher up. There's nothing I can do without making it worse for him." Kate stood and walked to the window, her hands curling into fists. This was exactly what Camilla wanted. To isolate her. To show anyone who might consider helping Kate that there would be consequences. "We need to find a way to thank him properly," Kate said after a long silence. "Privately. Away from here." William nodded. "I'll arrange it." 3 days later, Kate and William met Thomas at a small cafe on the outskirts of London. It was discreet, out of the way, the kind of place where no one would recognize them. Thomas arrived in civilian clothes, looking uncomfortable but grateful. "You didn't have to do this, Your Highnesses," he said as he sat down across from them. "Yes, we did," Kate replied firmly. "You saved me, and you've paid the price for it." Thomas shook his head. "I knew the risks. I'd do it again." William leaned forward, his expression serious. "We want you to know that we see what you did, and we won't forget it. If you ever need anything, you come to us." "Understood?" Thomas nodded slowly, emotion flickering in his eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They talked for over an hour. About life. About the palace. About the things that happened behind the scenes that the public never saw. Thomas shared stories from his years of service. Some were funny. Others were darker. Tales of manipulation, favoritism, and quiet cruelty. "It's always been this way," Thomas said at one point. "The palace protects itself, not the people in it." Kate absorbed his words, feeling the weight of them settle over her. She'd known, of course. But hearing it from someone who'd lived it for years made it more real. When they parted ways, Kate hugged Thomas. It was brief, but genuine. He seemed surprised by the gesture, but he returned it. "Stay safe," he said softly. "You too," Kate whispered back. As they drove back toward the city, Kate stared out the window in silence. William reached over and took her hand. "Are you all right?" he asked. Kate nodded, though her expression was distant. "I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About how many others there are like Thomas. Good people trapped in a system that punishes them for doing the right thing." William squeezed her hand. "You can't save everyone, Kate." "I know," she said quietly. "But maybe I can change things." "Little by little," William smiled, though there was sadness in it. "That's why I love you." Back at the palace, Kate threw herself into her work. She increased her public appearances, focusing on causes she cared deeply about. Mental health, children's welfare, support for families in crisis. Every speech she gave, every hand she shook, every smile she offered was a quiet rebellion against the forces trying to diminish her. The public loved her. The press praised her. Her approval ratings soared. And that, more than anything, seemed to infuriate Camilla. Kate could see it in the way the Queen Consort's expression hardened whenever Kate's successes were mentioned. In the way Camilla would excuse herself from rooms when Kate's name came up. In the subtle but unmistakable chill that seemed to follow Kate through the palace halls. But Kate didn't flinch. She kept going, kept smiling, kept working. One afternoon, she was in the middle of a meeting with her staff when her assistant entered looking flustered.
"Your Highness, I'm so sorry to interrupt."
"But there's been a situation." Kate looked up, immediately alert. What kind of situation? The assistant hesitated. It's about the gala next week. The one for the Children's Literacy Foundation. Kate frowned. She'd been planning that event for months. It was one of her biggest projects of the year. What about it? Your speech, the assistant said carefully. It's been removed from the program. Kate's blood went cold. What do you mean removed? I just received word from the event coordinator. Apparently, there was a last-minute change. The Queen Consort will be delivering the keynote address instead. The room fell silent. Kate's staff exchanged uncomfortable glances. Everyone understood what this meant. Kate took a slow breath, keeping her expression neutral. I see. And when was this decision made? This morning, ma'am. Without consultation, Kate nodded slowly, her mind racing. This was another move. Another test. Camilla was taking something Kate had built, something she cared about, and claiming it as her own. All right, Kate said finally, her voice calm. Thank you for letting me know. After the meeting ended, Kate sat alone in her office. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply sat, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on her. This was her life now. A constant battle. A war fought not with weapons, but with words and gestures and stolen moments. She thought about giving up. About walking away. About finding a quiet life somewhere far from the palace and its politics. But then she thought about the children at the hospital. The families she'd met. The people who looked to her for hope and inspiration. She thought about Thomas, risking everything to protect her. She thought about William, standing beside her through it all, and she thought about herself. The woman she'd become, the woman she was still becoming. Kate stood up, smoothed her skirt, and walked to the mirror. She looked at her reflection, at the woman staring back at her, strong, tired, but unbroken. She wasn't going anywhere. The gala would go on. Camilla would give her speech, and Kate would stand in the audience, smiling graciously, playing her role. But she would also find another way, another platform, another opportunity to make her voice heard, because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been silenced, ever been dismissed, ever been told they didn't belong, and Kate was done being quiet. The night of the gala arrived cold and clear. The venue sparkled with lights, filled with influential donors, politicians, and members of high society. Everyone who mattered in London's charitable circles was there. Cameras flashed outside as guests arrived in elegant gowns and sharp suits. Kate arrived with William, her head held high. She wore a deep blue dress, simple but elegant. No flashy jewelry. No unnecessary drama. She wanted the focus to be on the cause, not on herself, but people noticed her anyway. They always did. Inside, the ballroom was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Tables were draped in white linens. Flowers cascaded from every centerpiece. It was everything Kate had envisioned when she'd started planning this event nearly a year ago, and now it belonged to someone else. Camilla arrived shortly after, dressed in regal purple, dripping with diamonds. She moved through the crowd like a queen surveying her kingdom. Gracious smiles, warm handshakes. The perfect hostess Kate watched from across the room, her expression carefully neutral. William stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her back. You don't have to stay for the whole thing, he murmured. Yes, I do, Kate replied quietly. If I leave, she wins. William said nothing, but his hand pressed a little firmer against her back, supportive, protective. As the evening progressed, Kate mingled with guests, discussing the foundation's work, listening to stories from teachers and literacy advocates. This was what she loved, the real conversations, the meaningful connections, the reminder of why this work mattered. But all the while, she could feel Camilla's eyes on her, tracking her movements, measuring her reactions. When dinner was served, Kate found herself seated at a table near the front, but not at the head table where Camilla sat, surrounded by dignitaries. Another small slight. Another calculated message. Kate ate in silence, participating in small talk when necessary, but mostly observing. Watching the dynamics play out around her, seeing who aligned with whom, who glanced nervously between her and Camilla, who avoided her gaze altogether. It was like watching a chess match where the pieces kept moving on their own. Finally, the speeches began. The Foundation's director spoke first, thanking everyone for their support and outlining the progress they'd made. Then he introduced Camilla. The Queen Consort rose to thunderous applause. She walked to the podium with practiced grace, her smile warm and welcoming. She spoke beautifully. About literacy, about children, about the importance of education and opportunity. She used many of the same points Kate had planned to make. The same statistics, the same stories. Kate recognized phrases from her own draft speech. Now delivered in Camilla's polished voice, Kate kept her expression neutral, clapping at the appropriate moments, nodding along as if hearing these ideas for the first time. But inside, anger simmered. This was theft, plain and simple. When Camilla finished, the applause was deafening. She beamed, soaking it in. Before returning to her seat, Kate wanted to scream, to stand up and tell everyone the truth, that this event was hers, that these words were hers, that everything Camilla had just taken credit for had been Kate's vision. But she didn't, because she knew that's exactly what Camilla wanted. A scene, a display of jealousy or frustration, something that could be twisted into a narrative about Kate being difficult or uncorrect. So Kate sat and smiled and clapped and applauded. After the formal program ended, guests moved into a reception area for drinks and mingling. Kate excused herself from her table and made her way toward a group of Foundation volunteers she'd worked with closely over the past months. These were the people who did the actual work. The teachers. The organizers. The ones in the trenches, Your Highness, one of them said warmly as Kate approached. That speech was lovely. Though we all know whose vision this really was, Kate smiled, surprised by the directness. I'm just glad the Foundation is getting the support it needs. Another volunteer, a woman named Sarah, leaned in closer. We know what you've done for us. The hours you've put in. The plans you've made. Don't think for a second we don't see it. Kate felt emotion rise in her throat. She hadn't expected this. This acknowledgement. This loyalty. Thank you, she said softly. That means everything to me. We've got your back, Sarah said firmly. All of us. As Kate moved through the crowd, she found similar reactions. Quiet words of support. Knowing looks. People who understood the politics at play and chose to stand with her anyway. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Near the end of the evening, Kate found herself momentarily alone near one of the tall windows overlooking the city. She stared out at the lights, lost in thought. Kate turned to find Margaret, the housekeeper, standing a few feet away. She was dressed in formal staff attire, here to oversee the palace's participation in the event. Thank you, Kate said. It wasn't easy. Margaret stepped closer, her voice dropping. I've worked royal events for 30 years. I've seen power plays and politics that would make your head spin. But I've never seen anyone handle it with as much grace as you did tonight. Kate's eyes stung with unexpected tears. Sometimes grace feels like weakness. It's not, Margaret said firmly. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand there and smile when everything inside you is screaming. Kate nodded, unable to speak. Margaret glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then continued. There are more people on your side than you realize. Inside the palace, outside of it. We're just waiting for the right moment to show it, before Kate could respond. Margaret gave her a small, warm smile and walked away. Disappearing into the crowd, Kate stood there for a long moment, staring after her, feeling something shift inside her chest. Hope, maybe. Or resolve. She wasn't alone. Even when it felt like it. Even when Camilla tried to isolate her, there were people watching. People who cared. People who were ready to stand with her when the time came. Kate took a deep breath and turned back toward the party. William was across the room, deep in conversation with a group of donors. When he caught her eye, he smiled. That same smile that had captured her heart years ago. That same smile that reminded her why she'd chosen this life. She smiled back. And in that moment, she made a decision. She wouldn't just survive this. She would rise above it, not through confrontation. Not through public battles or tabloid wars, but through her work. Through her dedication. Through showing the world who she really was and what she truly stood for, Camilla could steal speeches. She could manipulate situations. She could play her games, but she couldn't steal Kate's heart, or her purpose, or the connections she'd built with real people doing real work. And in the end, that would matter more than any crown or title or position. As the evening drew to a close, Kate and William prepared to leave. They said their goodbyes, thanked the organizers, and made their way toward the exit. As they walked past Camilla, who was surrounded by admirers, Kate paused. The queen consort looked up, meeting her gaze. For a moment, the two women simply stared at each other, a silent acknowledgement of the battle being waged between them. Then Kate smiled. A real smile, genuine and warm. "Lovely speech tonight, Your Majesty," Kate said graciously. "The Foundation is lucky to have your support." Camilla's expression flickered. Confusion, maybe even surprise. She'd expected coldness, distance, perhaps even confrontation. Instead, she got kindness. "Thank you, Catherine," Camilla replied, her voice carefully measured. Kate nodded once, then continued walking, William at her side. Behind them, Camilla watched them go, her smile fading into something harder, something uncertain, because Kate had just done something Camilla hadn't anticipated. She'd refused to play the game by Camilla's rules, and that changed everything. The weeks following the gala brought a strange kind of peace. Not the absence of conflict, but a lull. Like the pause before thunder, Camilla continued her duties with perfect poise. Kate did the same. They crossed paths regularly, exchanged polite words, maintained the appearance of family unity. But beneath the surface, both women knew the truth. This wasn't over. Kate focused on what she could control. Her calendar filled with visits to hospitals, schools, community centers. She met with her patronages, launched new initiatives, gave interviews about causes she cared about. Every appearance was genuine. Every word carefully chosen. Every action intentional, the public responded. Her popularity climbed steadily. Social media celebrated her warmth. The press wrote glowing articles about her dedication. Even the most critical commentators struggled to find fault. And that, more than anything, seemed to unsettle Camilla. Kate could see it in small ways. The tightness around Camilla's mouth when Kate's successes were mentioned. The way she changed subjects when Kate's name came up in conversation. The subtle redirection of royal attention and resources. But Kate didn't respond. Didn't retaliate. Didn't give Camilla anything to use against her. She simply kept working. One morning, Kate received an unexpected visitor. It was Lady Sarah, an older member of the extended royal family who'd always been kind to Kate. She rarely came to London anymore, preferring her country estate, but she'd made the trip specifically to see Kate. They met in Kate's private sitting room. Tea served quietly before the staff withdrew. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries," Lady Sarah began, her voice direct but warm. "I'm here because I'm worried about you." Kate set down her teacup. "I'm fine." "No, you're not," Lady Sarah said gently. "You're surviving. There's a difference." Kate looked away, feeling the weight of those words settle over her. Lady Sarah leaned forward. "I've watched this family for 60 years. I've seen what happens to people who threaten the established order, especially women. They either break or they learn to navigate waters so treacherous that they lose themselves in the process." "What are you saying?" Kate asked quietly. "I'm saying you need allies," Lady Sarah replied. "Real ones. Not just staff members who whisper support in hallways. You need people with influence. People who can stand with you publicly when the time comes." Kate felt tears threaten. "I don't want to cause division in the family." "You're not causing it, dear," Lady Sarah said firmly. It already exists. You're just the latest target, she paused, her expression softening. But you're also different from the others. You're stronger, more resilient. And people see that. I don't feel strong, Kate admitted. Strength isn't about never being afraid, Lady Sarah said. It's about continuing despite the fear. And that's exactly what you've been doing. They talked for over an hour. Lady Sarah shared stories from her own years navigating royal life. The battles she'd fought, the compromises she'd made, the moments she'd stood firm, and the moments she'd bent. When she finally left, she embraced Kate tightly. You're going to be fine, she whispered. Because you have something Camilla will never have. What's that? Kate asked. People actually love you. Not because they have to. Not because of a title. But because of who you are? After Lady Sarah departed, Kate sat alone with those words. She thought about all the people who'd shown her kindness over these difficult months. Thomas, Margaret, the Foundation volunteers. Lady Sarah, even strangers on the street who shouted encouragement when she passed. She wasn't fighting this alone. That realization gave her courage. Several weeks later, Kate attended a state dinner. It was a formal affair, filled with foreign dignitaries and political leaders. Protocol dictated seating arrangements, speeches, and timing down to the minute. Kate sat between two ambassadors, engaging in diplomatic small talk, playing her role perfectly. Across the table, Camilla held court with prime ministers and foreign royals. Everything proceeded smoothly, till dessert. The servers brought out an elaborate presentation. Individual plates featuring intricate chocolate sculptures and seasonal fruit. Kate watched as each guest received their dish. When the server placed Kate's plate before her, she glanced down and froze. Strawberries. Fresh strawberries. Arranged artfully around the chocolate, beautiful, elegant, and potentially deadly. Kate had a severe strawberry allergy. Not as severe as her shellfish allergy, but serious enough. It was documented, known, part of every official file, just like the shellfish had been. Kate's heart began to race. She looked up, scanning the table. Her eyes found Camilla's across the distance. The queen consort was watching her, waiting. This was another test. Another moment where Kate would have to choose how to respond. Kate's mind flashed back to the first dinner, to Thomas stepping forward, to the confrontation that had followed, to the consequences he'd faced for protecting her. She thought about making a scene, about calling out the pattern, about forcing everyone to acknowledge what was happening. But then she looked around the table, at the dignitaries, the cameras stationed around the room for official photographs, the press waiting outside to report on every detail. Making a scene wouldn't just embarrass Camilla, it would embarrass the entire family. Create an international incident. Give ammunition to critics of the monarchy, and Kate refused to be the person who brought that down, so she did. Something else, she smiled. Then she calmly turned to the ambassador beside her and engaged him in conversation about his country's education system. She gestured with her hands as she spoke, and in doing so, casually moved her dessert plate to the side, as if she were simply too engaged in conversation to eat. Minutes later, when the servers began clearing dishes, hers went untouched. No drama. No confrontation. No scene. Just a quiet, elegant refusal to participate in the game. Later, as guests moved into the reception hall, William found her immediately. I saw what happened, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I know, Kate replied calmly. Kate, this is the second time. We can't keep ignoring. We're not ignoring it, Kate interrupted gently. We're choosing our battles. And this isn't the one. William stared at her, conflicted. So what do we do? Kate looked across the room to where Camilla was accepting praise from a group of guests. Their eyes met briefly. Camilla's expression was unreadable. We keep going, Kate said softly. We keep doing our work. We keep being who we are. And we trust that eventually, the truth will speak for itself. William shook his head, frustrated but understanding. I hate that you have to deal with this. So do I, Kate admitted. but I'm not going to let it destroy who I am or what we're building. In the weeks that followed, Kate noticed something shift. Stories began appearing in the press. Not tabloid gossip, but thoughtful pieces in respected publications. Articles examining power dynamics within the royal family. Opinion pieces questioning why certain charitable initiatives receive more attention than others. Someone was talking. Multiple someones, actually. Kate suspected she knew who. Margaret, Lady, Sarah, other staff members and family friends who'd witnessed the patterns and decided to speak up. Not directly. Not with accusations. But with careful observations and pointed questions, the public began to notice. Social media discussions multiplied. People connected dots, asked questions, defended Kate without her having to defend herself. It was subtle, but it was powerful. One afternoon, Kate was reading in her sitting room when William entered. His face lit with something she hadn't seen in months. Relief, maybe even joy. "You need to see this," he said, handing her his phone. It was a poll. A public opinion survey about the royal family. Kate's approval ratings had reached an all-time high. She'd surpassed every other member of the family, including Camilla. Kate stared at the numbers, feeling emotions swell in her chest. Not triumph. Not vindication. Just relief. She'd done it. She'd survived. She'd stayed true to herself. And people had noticed. "Kate," William said softly, "you did this. All of this, without compromising who you are." Kate looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "We did this. I couldn't have made it without you." That evening, there was another family dinner. Smaller this time, more intimate. Kate and William attended, as did Camilla and a few other family members. The atmosphere was subdued, polite, careful. When dinner was served, Kate noticed immediately. Her plate contained a simple grilled chicken with vegetables. No shellfish. No strawberries. No hidden dangers. It's just food. She glanced up and found Camilla watching her from across the table. For the first time, there was no malice in that gaze. No calculation. Just weariness. Camilla raised her wineglass slightly. A small gesture. Almost imperceptible. Kate hesitated, then raised her own glass in return. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't even an end to the conflict. But it was an acknowledgement. A recognition that both women understood the battle had shifted. That Kate had proven she wouldn't break. Wouldn't run. Wouldn't sacrifice her integrity for safety. She had earned her place at this table. Not through manipulation or games, but through persistence, through grace, through refusing to become someone she wasn't. As the dinner continued, Kate found herself relaxing slightly. The road ahead would still be difficult. There would be more challenges, more tests, more moments where she'd have to choose between fighting and enduring. But she knew now that she could survive it, that she had people who believed in her, that her strength came not from titles or positions, but from something deeper, something unchangeable. She thought about Thomas, wherever he was now, about Margaret still moving quietly through palace halls, about Lady Sarah in her country home, about the volunteers at the foundation, about the families she'd met and the children she'd inspired. They were all watching, all waiting, all believing in her, and that made all the difference. Kate took a bite of her meal, savoring the simplicity of it, the normalcy, the safety. Then she looked up at William, who was watching her with love and pride in his eyes. She smiled and continued eating because she had survived. And she would keep surviving, one meal at a time, one day at a time, one moment of grace at a time. This was her life now, and she was going to live it on her own terms, no matter what.